Hey, this is Chris. I wanted to make this video to share some tips that I've read about and been able to find useful in my research. And essentially, the story goes my dad had a third cousin do a DNA test. We found some segments of DNA in common that were really interesting. We wanted to learn about them to see if we could learn more about our common Smith ancestry through them. And I want to show you the process I used to explore that question of who are these other people that share that segment of DNA that my dad and his third cousin share. So the first things first, I'll pull up my dad's kit in the one-to-many, and then I'll show you. So here's my cousin here, Ray Smith, and then we're just gonna close this, and we're gonna do a people who match one or both of two kits. So I'm gonna put my dad's kit there, my cousin's kit there, and we're gonna run this. Now, for time's sake, I've already run this report, but I want you to take a look at what this does here. Is there's two groups. This top group, and they're separated by this break right here. This top group is everybody in my dad's matches that also match my cousin. It's super useful for looking at the DNA of our common population, Smith, Hendricks, Wheeler, Wiley. So essentially, you go through here and you select all these kits. And I'm not going to do them all, but I would recommend doing them all because they're all going to have information. And we hit submit. The next thing that's going to do is build a tag group. So notice we have the kits included up there. We want to save all this information so we don't have to go through that process again. And we can just type in a name and give it a color and then hit add. And it's going to create a tag group that we can then reference without having to run that report again. How do we reference it? Well, it's a great question. We can go into the multiple kit analysis tool, and this is the kit that I made out of that report, in common with matches between my dad and my cousin. And all we have to do is check the box and hit visualize, and it loads all those kits into one table for analysis. And the first thing I'll show you is the matrices. So the autosomal matrix is pretty useful because it shows how closely related everybody else is to each other. And then the other thing that's useful is the X matrix. The X matrix will compare all of these people's X DNA to each other, and it will help identify people who are likely related via their maternal lines. And then the other thing that I like to take a look at here, okay, we can do a segment matrix. First 20 kits. So let's do this as well. Ah, darn, and they don't do it in a nice graphic way. But essentially, this is saying, okay, my dad shares with my cousin this DNA, but he also shares DNA with this cousin. So we see it's both on chromosome 3. It's in different location, but you know, it might be something worth looking into. I really don't like this table because it's very noisy, like visually. But okay, so here's the autosomal matrix table, and notice not everybody matches each other, which is, you know, to be expected. But we can tell by some of these. Again, this is the X matrix, I believe. We can tell in some cases, like the 196. These 196s, these are duplicate kits. These people have identical X chromosomes in their kits, so we can ignore that. But for example, Skip up here, he matches 645. So he matches Virginia. And we know that's true because they are related through their mothers closely. So now in this version, unfortunately, they don't allow you to click on it. But in Tier 1, they do give you that option. So then the other thing we can look at, we know that Virginia, Jean, and Skip, and Tom, they're all related through the Smiths. And when we see things like this, we have this Uncle Lee who matches Ray at 90 centimorgans. That's pretty interesting. We should take a look at that and see what segments he's sharing. And so some of the limitations of what we see here are really what you get out of the Tier 1 tools in Genesis. For example, in Tier 1 Genesis, I'd be able to click on this 90.3 and it would automatically pull up a one-to-one autosomal comparison and be able to see the segments that are in common. And then the other thing, if we wanted to take a look who else Uncle Lee, whoever this guy is, matches, we can just draw it over, and we see it's pretty rare in his matching. But this is just rough information. It's not all on the same chromosome, but it could be useful because we know that this large group up here is connected through Smiths. These guys may have Smiths as well. And it's not a 100% certainty thing, but it's worth exploring. And then, so the other real valuable part of this process is the 2D chromosome browser, in my opinion. What this allows us to do is look at the exact segments that everybody shares. So just think about what we're looking at. These people match both my dad and his third cousin, so we know it's going to be through one of 4 families back then. And we know, like, we look at the large segments. And so we looked at this chromosome 3 here, and the segment on chromosome 3, we found out that matched to a Spurlock population. And sure enough, J. Lawson, he descends from a John Madison Spurlock. And we also have, oh, the other guy's not in there. But it's interesting because we can look at, see, J. Lawson, okay, because he matches, it's actually a pretty small segment. The next person, see, so J. Lawson also matches a little segment here on CR11, and then there's also another segment up here on CR1. So we could possibly make an inference that, at least a hypothesis, that this segment on CR3 here could be related to Smiths because it's linked to J. Lawson. And then so Fresno, Chile, since they share that segment and it's larger, they may be closer to the person from where we received this little segment. Now, likely this is, as far back as that is, it's probably from an ancestor of the Smith, but it's hard telling. And then we see stuff like this. This is, you know, this is the makings of a triangulation group right here, and that seems like it'd be kind of useful. So what we'd want to do in this situation is just reach out to these 4 people, because they don't appear to all have trees, and just say, hey, you know, what do your trees look like? Can you share them? And hopefully they get back to you. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to explore that question. The tier 1 tools can offer some insight, but you can get in the weeds real quick. But mainly what I wanted to share the screen for was we did our kits that match one or two or both of two kits, and then compared them all to each other, and then looked at them from the perspective of the first kit that we added to the group. So that's the other thing. When you do your comparison, the chromosome browser and all the comparisons are going to be based upon the first kit listed in the group. In the tier 1 tools in Genesis, they actually have the ability to change what kit you want to reference from by putting in a field down here. But and the other thing, like, this also gives us the ability to look at other large segments that we may not have been aware of prior. So like chromosome 9 here, we have these two folks, haven't seen them before, and they're on the same chromosome as Skip and Virginia, which, you know, that's promising that it could be through Smiths, could be through Rice's. So it just, this is the starting point for further exploration. And the next step after analyzing all of this is emails. Just to see how valuable this is, like chromosome 17, if Robert W. Young shares 30 centimorgans, that's huge. Apparently this guy shares 7 segments of DNA. So I'm not sure who he is, but he's relevant to the Smith-Hendricks Wheeler-Wiley ancestry. Yeah, he's sharing multiple segments there. And then they don't have the triangulation tools up, unfortunately. But then we can also take a look at GEDmach. And so they have trees. Let's see who Laura Powell is descended from. I think I've seen Laura Powell on Ancestry DNA. So whenever I look at the tree, I always pull up like 10 generations. And then I do a quick search for Smith. She has a Nancy Smith from Rutherford. Married a Whitaker. So, might be Smith. It's hard telling. You need to research this Nancy if you can. I always, at least in this situation, look for Orange County, North Carolina. Interesting that we see this Carrington line here. Researchers online, it goes back through Barbados, but then supposedly it comes out of Cheshire from the Carringtons. I have a hypothesis that that line could be descended from a female Carrington. So her son took up her maiden name instead of taking his father's name for some reason. I don't know. That's a hypothesis. I don't know if it's true or not. But these Carringtons, they were in person in Orange around the same time the Smiths were. So, and then at this point, it's just, you know, letting your fingers do the walking, your eyes kind of do the combing, and see what you can find. This is about all that we can do with the free tools. There are, you know, your standard one-to-one comparisons, but to do a bulk comparison that matches one or multiple
kits is the most useful for the free tools. So I hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment or send me an email. And apologize for the monotonous tone, but I don't have a script. So talk to you later. Bye-bye.